Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Ojeho.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we're talking about this past weekend's CPL matches. We're back on our match reviews. Some pretty important matches in terms of the table, some pretty important matches in terms of potential future for the CPL. We had the CPL On Tour match, and we're going to talk about the impacts that had both on the field and off the field. And of course, we had a couple of big rivalry games that went about the way you would expect between the likes of Forge and Cavalry. But before we dive into all of those matches, remember to follow us on all our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on YouTube under the same name to see the visual side of the podcast. So let's start with the first game of the match day, which was Vancouver FC against Ottawa. I was unable to go to this match, unfortunately. I had my own team. I had a team trial that I had to oversee for my own coaching team, so I wasn't unable to go to this match. And I'm a little sad because it turned out to be actually a quite a cracking match, and I didn't know that Jesse Marsh was actually at the match. The men's national team coach was at the match, looking on to see maybe the future of the CPL, and I think he might have seen a rising star from Vancouver FC specifically, because obviously Emmerich Fotzing has been kind of an under the radar revelation for Vancouver FC. They obviously haven't had the greatest start to the season, but he's been one of the bright sparks for them throughout the season so far, and he made his mark again today as he scored in the 2-2 draw. But let's talk about the first 45 minutes of the game, because that was really Vancouver being effective and Ottawa being very ineffective because Vancouver had 30% possession, but still managed to get 14 shots and 3 on target. So that's quite good. It shows that, they're able to play sort of on the break, be able to be more, like I said, effective in the when they have the ball in possession. A little fortunate on the first goal, an own goal by Cloutier. Luke drilled that ball across, kind of went off of him and went into the back of the net. But still, good play from them to be able to create those chances. But when you look at also like Atletico Ottawa's chances, they had 9 shots and 3 on target in the first half, and it's only 3 on target. It should really be, I think, 5 if you count posts, because I hit the post twice in that first half. I think all in all, soaking up the pressure, Vancouver FC, they were able to do what I think Afshin Gobby wanted to do, which is be mindful of Ottawa's dangers in the attack, but also be aware that they are a team that likes to concede, or maybe it doesn't like to concede, but tends to concede.
Will do, yeah.
Exactly, especially in the first half.
Yeah, then, I mean, Vancouver came out like they listened to our pod last week saying that the bottom half was adrift. Yeah, incredible, great start to the game. I think they looked at, you look at how Ottawa play, and those teams who come up against them will know they've got to try and soak up the pressure. It's going to be very hard for these bottom half sides to go sort of blow for blow with them like throughout a match. You have to do what you can. They rode their luck a bit. There were some good saves in there from Callum Irvin. There was some poor finishing at times. There was bad luck. I mean, there was like I can't remember who played the little chip over, possibly Aparicio to David Rodriguez, who controls the ball like just a few yards out and just scuffs it wide. So they had chances, and it seemed one of those days for Ottawa. But yeah, it's when you give up that many, though, you're not with the way that Ottawa play, you're not going to be able to keep them all out. But it was a really good, really valiant effort from Vancouver to keep it going like that, and knowing that this team will leak goals, and you just got to try and take your chances when you can. And I think when that happened so well in that first half, it just opened it up in the game, where it sort of made Ottawa a little bit nervous of what what Vancouver could actually do on the break with quite a bit of pace up there.
Yeah. And I mean, when you have the return of Kunle Dadaluke, we know that he has bundles of pace. He's strong enough to shrug off challenges when he is, mid-run. And I feel like having him back gave Vancouver a little bit more of that edge that maybe they had been missing, just because they have that kind of pace out wide, kind of drags defenders away, makes them maybe think twice about, crowding the central channels because they give Luke too much space. And I think it was an effective way of playing, knowing that Luke was there, playing on the counter, knowing they had that sort of pace. Because you look at some of the other players that they have, and it's not as pacey as you would imagine, with Diaz or Campbell in the forward positions. You're looking for maybe like Batista. He seems more like a technical player rather than like a pacey player. So Luke really is the wide option with Elijah Ba to be able to.
Elijah Ba as well, yeah. They're pushing those wing backs back, weren't they, a little bit, and making it a little bit more, trying to force them back as much as they could, knowing that they could break on them.
Yeah, but it was really, I was quite impressed looking back at the game, at how Vancouver were able to. I think that they were able to be clever, and I talked about this last week when we were talking about York United, about like knowing when to be clever and knowing, when maybe you can't play the most beautiful football, but as long as you are smart about it and you are pragmatic about it, knowing what your team's strengths are, knowing what your opposition's strengths are, and try to expose their weaknesses. I feel like Vancouver were able to do that, and I was actually quite impressed not only by the players but Afshin Ghapi to have a really effective game plan for 45 minutes. Because then halftime came, and then David Mejia, I'm assuming, had quite an intense halftime talk with his team, and it seemed to have worked because in the second half it didn't take quite long. It took about 10 minutes in the second half for Atletico Ottawa to get one back. Sam Salter with a diving, like a sliding, I guess, a better way to say it, a sliding shot to try to get on the end of a cross to take them back into contention. And as soon as Ottawa scored that goal, I think everyone gonna feel momentum shift. And when you have a team like Ottawa, when they get going, they're a very, very hard team to stop. Once they get that little bit, they smell that blood in the water, that's when they start to get going. And 9 minutes later, David Rodriguez made it 2-2. And I think for Ottawa, seeing David Rodriguez back in the lineup was massive for them. I mean, he had 7 shots, obviously 1 goal, and created 3 chances. And being able to see Ottawa back into that flow, obviously, there's no surprise that they're able to do that because of Rodriguez's presence. I think overall, just that second half response, it felt like they just kind of stepped up their game a little bit and realized, wait a minute, this is not maybe the stroll that they were expecting coming to Willoughby and facing Vancouver FC.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what Ottawa seem to have in them, doesn't it? Like, that they've got themselves worked out. They've got good partnerships around the pitch, but they're also very fit. And they're going to continue going. Like, as much effort as you put in that first half, you're going to have to do it all again because they're going to keep coming at you, and it doesn't look like they'll ever slow down throughout that 90 minutes. So it's going to be quite difficult for teams to work out new ways. I mean, Vancouver have given it a great shot in this one. To come away with the draw was really good. Could have grabbed a winner at the end with that free kick that came off the post as well. But it was a really good effort from the team. But it's very difficult to keep this to keep Ottawa down for 90 minutes and in the second half. So teams are really going to have to work out new ways of dealing with them in the second half as well.
Yeah, because Ottawa are really turning themselves into a second half team. If you look, obviously in this match, they were 2-0 down against the Wanderers. The Wanderers, it was kind of even in the first half. Second half, obviously, that's when the Wanderers got the 2 quick goals. But a lot of the time that Ottawa have been conceding, it has been in the first half, whether it's 1 or 2. And in the second half, it's tending also where they start to pick up more of their goals and where they kind of settle the game. And it's probably something that David Mejia is obviously aware of. and probably something that they will want to improve upon. But I mean, if you can do the business, if you can see 2 but score 3 in the second half, if you can see 2 in the first half but score 3 in the second half, I mean, a win is a win at the end of the day. So as long
Exactly.
as they continue to be as dangerous as they have been, I think they'll still be in a good spot. But it goes to show, really, that Ottawa, as good as they have been, have a chink in the armor. They do have weakness. Similar when we talk about, the Halifax game. Halifax didn't win this weekend, so the 2 top teams, they're not unbeatable, and so you're able to see a little bit more of the way that how it's a bit more even between like the top teams, and it really still is sort of open for everyone to be able to take the top spots at this point in the season.
Yeah, like dropping those points, like you say. Yeah, Forge and Cavalry had a chance to really catch up. One of them didn't they? Both of them slipped up.
Exactly. And for Vancouver, still probably the chances aren't great to make it into maybe that 5th position. We'll see what happens with, obviously, York United getting a good result this weekend. But it's good progress, I think, so far compared to the beginning of the season, where, if I recall, you might have called them trash.
Yeah. 2 weeks in they were.
Yeah. So
But
it's obviously progress.
they're doing more. Well, I mean, they're scoring more goals than a few of the others down there. So if that continues, if that trend carries on, at least puts them in a better position than 1 or 2 others.
Yeah. And obviously, and they have to ride their luck a bit too. Like I mentioned, Ottawa hit the post a bunch of times. They had that goal disallowed at the very end, where they were able to celebrate it, and then it got called back. I know that kind of was a bit of a confusing one, because they were allowed to celebrate and everything. It was like a minute after the goal was scored that they called it back for Callum Patterson, a pullback on Campagna. A little bit of suspect refereeing there. I think for Ottawa fans feeling aggrieved about that, I feel sympathy for you. But yeah, as long as Vancouver FC can keep playing the way they're doing and riding a little bit of the luck, maybe they'll have a chance to make it into the playoffs for the first time in their history. But now let's move on to the second match. And this was, again, probably one of the biggest matches of the weekend, because it's the 2 top dogs going at it in Forge versus Cavalry. And the start gave us hope for a classic here, because we've watched the CPL enough, Mike, to know that when Forge and Cavalry face, unless it's, in a CPL final, most of the times, it's a little bit of a dull affair from a neutral point of view, mostly because both teams are able to play as well as they have been, in terms of the strengths, knowing each other so well. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. and Bobby, they know each other so well. They're able to cancel each other out so much. Now, the first goal was scored within 2 minutes, I believe, from Cavalry. And it was thanks to that man again, Fraser Aird, who was able to find, I think, Sergio Camargo it was, in the box to make it 1-0. And I'm running out of words, I think, Mike, to talk about Fraser Aird, because he's one of my favorite players to watch. And it's just because of his delivery, how good he is at finding players in the box, whether that be, from like free kicks, corners, whether that be from just out on the wing. His service, his ability is so strong. And 2 minutes in, he proves exactly why he's one of the best fullbacks in the league. And Camargo gets a goal to put Cavalry 1-0 up, and immediately we were all perked up, thinking, okay, we got a game on our hands.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the start of the game and the interviews beforehand, and Bobby was getting interviewed, and there was like, this game happens so much and it's always so tight. What do you do to like try and work out how to get one over your big rivals? And he said it's all about the little details, and I think one of those little details was starting from like second one rather than the second minute, because he just got just completely gone his name. Jevremovic, the left back,
Yeah.
just wasn't awake. Like how Ed. I mean, it was a great ball to Ed, really great control, and really like what Ed did was fantastic, like brilliant assist. But Jovanovic just wasn't in it at all. He looked like he hadn't started. And yeah, that made it really exciting. So it's like great. Like you want Cavalry to go ahead, you want Forge to have to like start chasing them down. And when the second goes in as well, you think, right, we've got a contest here. And yeah, it just didn't quite evolve into that.
No. I mean, we did see Forge come back and equalize in the 17th minute. Not a beautiful goal. I mean, great technique from Anand Poma to kind of hit that on the half volley. But I thought it was a very poor goal to concede for Cavalry. Had the chance to clear their lines, were unable to do so. And credit to Masunda. I think that's a player
Yeah.
that a lot of people will be talking about. 19 years old, obviously Christian Borges is injured, comes in and shows the grittiness of this team, that of what this team kind of symbolizes. You look at how he fought. That ball bounced up and it was about to go out for I think it was a corner, and some players might have left that, be like, okay, it's a corner, it's good, but he fought and he got it back and he flicked it back and the play continued and it ended up being in a goal. And for a 19-year-old to be able to kind of show that, I think again it embodies what Forge are about, which is like never say die, always keep fighting. And it really did kind of show this kid's got something about him, and he could have had multiple assists in this match beyond the one that he got already. And yeah, I've just been really impressed by him.
Yeah, really great. It's always curious with Forge because they've got such good players, like, and they do retain players quite well. They bring players in. Obviously, they brought back like Reza Rama, players like that. So they have this strong team that goes and does very well against MLS sides and competes every year. And so trying to find those opportunities, like as a young player, like Kwasi Boka got his last year, like probably and really took it. And this kid's doing it again. Like, he's trying. He's really putting in the effort. He's got a bit, like, he looks like he's got a bit of quality about him, but he just keeps going for it and he keeps trying to make things happen. And he's taking that opportunity, like some others have done, with some injuries to key players, and you get these chances in the CPL with the U21 minutes, obviously. And I think in this league, and fans want to see that, and managers respond to that. And if he's gonna keep on with this sort of work rate and this sort of effort in those final thirds and putting in those chances, then he's going to get himself quite a few minutes this year as a good, like. And even when Borges and Soignier come back, I think you're going to see him getting rewarded, maybe not keeping them out of the team like week in, week out, but getting more and more time on the pitch because he looks like he's fully trusted by Bobby.
Yeah, he does. He does seem like he's fully trusted. And I felt so bad for him because he had a great pass to Brian Wright, and Brian Wright just struggles again to score. And I feel bad because he does do all of the right things. He does do all of the right things, but when it comes to that final action to scoring, it's just the thing that he lacks. And I know that Bobby believes in him because of everything that he does outside of scoring. But I still wish he just was able to have a little bit more composure in front of that, because it would be nice for Masuna to get a second assist in that one, and obviously, get the win, because Forge haven't been playing badly, but this is their 5th draw in 8 matches.
I mean, it's obviously unbeaten, but just not getting that last that clincher in any of the matches.
No, and that's the thing. You look at the way that they're playing and they're creating good chances, but they're not finishing the dinner. This was a game where Ford should have won, I think, based on the chances that they had.
Yeah.
They had a lot of good chances, and Carducci, credit to him, made some really big stops.
Really good.
But Cavalry, were started great, but were pretty much second best at long periods throughout the match, and to be able to have, you know, Brian Wright just kind of tuck one of those in, it could have been the difference for Forge. I don't think it's alarm bells yet, but I don't know. Do you think Brian Wright can be that striker to help Forge, get back and get back their North Star Cup? Because I'm still kind of like iffy on it just because of his lack of composure in front of goal.
Yeah, no, it's a really difficult one. I feel bad for sort of ripping on it. I feel like ripping on him now, but I look across the rest of the league, and the Ottawa, you take Salter over Wright every day. Wanderers, Telfer, I think at times I take him. There's a bit of a coin flip on that one, and Telfer's not even an out striker. Coimbra, like he seems, we'll see. Like he's a younger player, obviously, but that's a tough one. Cavalry, Wachewski, like yeah, you take him. York United, Altabelli, I'll take him at the moment. Like he's off on a great start. Like Vancouver, you take Diaz over Brian Wright. Like you look down the league, and there's not many teams where you look at them and think, well, I'd rather Brian Wright than the striker I've got now. I don't think there's many teams that, other than maybe Pacific and Valour, that would probably say that.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I mean, if Forge had Julian Altabelli instead of Brian Wright right now, I think it'd be a very different story in the CPL, especially on the form that he's in. And let's move on to talk about him and York, because York got finally a big win, not
Yeah.
against Vancouver, against actual table toppers, Halifax Wanderers, in a massive match. And it wasn't even at their home, because this was, as we alluded to earlier, the CPL On Tour match, where it was in Quebec. And when you have games like this, obviously these are the litmus tests that the CPL has to be able to see, do cities have the necessary interest, have the necessary backing and support from the fans to be able to maintain a CPL team for the future. As we were talking about a little bit earlier in last week's episode about how you can't just give everybody who asks for a team, because you have to check if they're sustainable. One of the biggest things is there the interest.
Yeah,
I can say I think for Quebec there is a good amount of interest.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, before you talk about the statistics and like the numbers and everything that went with this, I think one of the most important like little asterisks they need to put on this was, oh my god, the weather was awful.
Yeah. The weather was awful, and that didn't stop them.
No.
That's how far they went. That did not stop them. They went and in droves, in numbers, and it wasn't even just all of the the Quebecois people themselves. I mean, the privateers, this was one of their, technically their closest away match in Quebec, and they came in and with great numbers, and York a lot of York fans made the trip as well, and it was just overall a really, really, really strong showing for Quebec, and goes to show again why they, I would say, are arguably the favorites, or more maybe most deserving, to have a team, whether that's in Laval, whether that's in Montreal, to go with CF Montreal, or whether that's in Quebec City, wherever it might be, for them to have a team, because they got, now let's get to the numbers. They got over 7,000 attendance, exactly 7,218 fans in attendance for this match. And I think for this, obviously it's a one-time game. You're not going to have 7,000 fans every game at Quebec, but just to be able to have this kind of a attention on a match goes to show that Canada wants to see professional soccer, men's Div 1 professional soccer, in its cities. And it goes to show that expansion is viable, and it's just about making sure that they choose the right people to lead the teams in the right cities to make sure that they are sustainable in the long term. But I was really impressed by the fans that came out and the ambience and everything in this match. And for those that were, supporting York United, this was definitely a very, very good match to make the travel to, because they came out 2-0 winners. And we were talking about how York United, out of the bottom four teams that were kind of drifting away, were the
Yeah.
ones that seemed the most able to get out of that position and either clinch fifth or start to close the gap on the top four, even though the results weren't going their way. We talked about, they just had to be clever, they had to be smart, they had to be more pragmatic when facing teams to be able to close out results. And you got to say, I think I don't know if anybody was listening to us, listening to podcasts with that, but I felt like that's exactly what they did. They grinded out a 2-0 win again against, a very, very good Halifax side. It wasn't their best game, obviously a bit of a day
No.
off for Halifax, but they went 1-0 up thanks to Julian Altobelli in the 29th minute, and they held on to that 1-0 all the way until the 89th minute, where Stefan Yates scored the 2-0. And that's exactly what I wanted to see from York. It's exactly the response I wanted to see. You get a goal, can you grind it out? And when Halifax were throwing everything, you catch them on the break and get that 2-0. And I think for me, that's the perfect game. That's a perfect victory for a team like York United. You get the lead early, you defend it, you catch them on a break, you get the 2-0 to kill the game, and then you get all 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, it's all round like really good performance from all of them. I think, yeah, well, Vancouver tried to prove us wrong. York really did try to prove us right. So we've got to get on board with York United even more now. But yeah, great, really good play. I mean, obviously, it was a good start to the game. They were then defending a lot more, like you mentioned, and counter-attacking. And I don't know, as you read, I mean, they said it in the commentary as well. Like, he wasn't quite in the game very much in the first half, barely any. I think it said he had 5 or 6 touches maybe in the first half. Very quiet. But the second half, he just really got into it and really started causing Halifax a problem on the break, and will probably be able to forgive Max Ferrari for not finishing that chance once Stefan Yates made it 2-0. Could have been very different if
he would have had his head on a platter if they would have not been able to get that result, because Elijah Reed did everything. He dicked out the keeper, dicked out the defense. He said, "Here, just score, just put it in," and he was unable to do it. I couldn't believe it. My head in my hands. I couldn't believe he didn't score that game.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was immense. So yeah, there's some obviously good saves from Ray and Yesley in there, but yeah, really, really good game plan. And yeah, so it's another great. I mean, it is a great to have the sort of highest number of people at a CPL On Tour event, and to get such a good game in it as well was really important. Because I know I'm trying to think back to the was it Vancouver Ottawa played in Kelowna?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kelowna, which from memory serves was 0-0, but I don't know if I've got that right. I could be wrong. I can't remember the result of that one. But to get a really good result in this one really helps as well. And as much as as much as I've maybe got used to too much professional football, having the American football lines on the pitch drove me nuts. I remember playing on pitches here when you play in school, and they've got all the markings from the different sports, and it just really irritates me trying to remember which lines to go to. But otherwise, the whole thing was fantastic. And you mentioned like how important it is to find these sustainable places, and like looking at some of the experiences that we've had with other teams, obviously like the likes of Edmonton who have fallen out of the league, and with these sort of additions of Vancouver struggling for numbers, like is competing with the like when they look at Quebec and you're going up and you're seeing where they played there with 7,000 people turning up, is that a lot because they're missing out on an MLS team up there. There isn't the competition, but there's like on the field, but there's all these fans that would like somewhere to go and watch football.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully, I mean, I do like the CPL On Tour, obviously, but I think people are now hoping that this starts to progress. And we talked last week about, Mark Noonan stepping down, and in terms of commissioner, somebody being a commissioner, nobody has been confirmed to step up. Obviously, we had what was his name, James
James
Johnson,
Johnson, yeah.
the Australian, to take over the CSB side of things. We don't know if he's going to take over the CPL side of things, but hopefully whoever steps up can kind of maybe accelerate the expansion, especially I think in Quebec. I mean, I know one of the things in Canada for those outside of Quebec is to kind of dunk on Quebec a little bit, but I do feel like they really do deserve a CPL team. I think they should have had a CPL team when the league started, and I think it's long overdue for them to get a CPL team. So I'm hoping this kind of accelerates the formation of a team somewhere in Quebec for all the Quebecois soccer fans to
Definitely.
have a new team to support, because things aren't going so well with the only team that they have in CF Montreal and MLS right now. So somebody else would be nice, I think, for them to be able to cheer on. But let's talk, I guess, a little bit about Halifax. I really think it was just nothing more than just a bad day at the office.
Yeah.
For them, it just didn't really go right for them. In most things, you have a couple of chances that they had, Caligari with a free kick. I thought that was really good technique. But they weren't able to really get the ball into the box much. And I think that, again, has to do with, York United. Ever since Mauro has brought Elijah Kukubi into defense, I think he's been immense for York United. And he's a big reason why Halifax didn't really have anything for, in terms of danger for this match. But I'm pretty sure they'll bounce back. And I think this is just one that Patrice guys will just write off. And then, it'll just be hopefully business as usual for them in their next match. It is against Forge away from home, so it's a big one for them. So they'll definitely want to make sure that they have their heads screwed on tight after this to try to continue to be in those top spots. But let's now close out with the fourth and final game of the weekend, which was, thankfully, in terms of the way we structured this, the most boring of the four games. So if you choose to switch her off at this point, we won't necessarily hold it against you, because it was a 0-0 sort of drab affair between Valor and Pacific. But it could have been a very different story had Valor been clinical, because they did have a lot more chances than Pacific. Pacific, for some reason, they just were content sitting back and waiting to sort of play on the break, but they only registered one shot on target, and that came in the 96th minute from 7 shots total. Well, Valor had 7 on target. They had as many on target, Valor, as Pacific had in general. 7 on target for Valor from 14 total shots. A lot of them were long shots, which obviously kind of stat pads it, but it still felt like Valor were the team that should have won this match. But as we've seen a lot of times this season, barring in a couple of games where they kind of showed up, they're just really struggling to make good in the box. They have good players around that can put the ball into the box and have that build-up play into the box. But once it gets into the box, it kind of just has been dying there for Valor. And the same can be said for Pacific. So I guess we shouldn't be really all that surprised that this ended in a game.
Yeah, it was a difficult one. Because, like you say, Valor built up where they can provide like balls into the box. You've got decent delivery from some players, but by the time they get there, there's one player in the box, and the rest of the defense are outnumbering them by far too much to be able to deal with, and it just leaves them for shots on from range. And I mean, there's some were really good. Like Max Anker had a good game, made some really good saves. Some he will comfortably dealt with, but Rizal had a couple really good chances from range, and Mla towards the end, near the end of the game, had a great strike from outside the box, which Max Anker did really well to save. Really good diving save to his left. So there was some. It wasn't just when you sort of see these things. There were a lot of long shots, and you just think it's just hope hopeful shots that are just out of frustration. Some of them were well hit. Is the best. Like I'm plucking at straws. I think to a degree, but it's both teams. They just don't know what to do once they get into the final third. Like teams will get defenders in front of the goal, between them and the goal. Sorry, and they haven't got the options. They haven't got the sort of creativity. They haven't got the ingenuity. They haven't got the movement to do too much to worry teams. And yeah, that's why that's sort of this is what we got really.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at their last few games where they have been impressive. It's the goals from range that are helping them out. That Figueiredo scored one against the Whitecaps, which was a banger. Veneciao scored one against Vancouver FC. Twardek scored one against who was it? York United.
Yeah, left foot outside the box.
Yeah, against York United. So it has been working, but you can't just rely on just moments of class from players from distance. It's always lovely to see them go in, but when your top goal scorer is your center back alongside Sean Hundle, 2 goals each for Kelsey Egwu and Sean Hundle. I mean, Sean Hundle's the only striker on roster that has scored this season. It's concerning for Valour because you do see improvements. Like if you actually watch, they are playing better, especially with the Portuguese players starting to become more involved. They are starting to improve as the season goes on, but they're unable to get anything to show for that because they can't, score inside the box. They're just relying on somebody to, bang one in from 30 yards out and hope that will be enough. And I think the same thing could be said for honestly for Pacific as well, because they are now winless and scoreless in 3 matches for Pacific. The last time they scored was that last-minute winner against York United on May 10th. That was the last time they scored. That was Emmanuel Montejano getting that
funny one where he's on the floor.
Exactly, that huge one where it basically bounced off of him and went in. But yeah, since then they lost 4-0 to Cavalry. They lost 1-0 to Forge, and obviously they drew 0-0 to Valour. I think in terms of actually seeing progress, Valour and Vancouver have been able to show me enough that shows that they might have a shout to challenging York United, I think, for the 5th position. But Pacific right now, and this, just in the past 3 games, they're not giving me much, really, just in the way that they're playing to be hopeful. And obviously injuries play a huge part in that because they lost some big players, Quintana and Krat. But even still, I feel like they haven't been doing much in the games to show that they deserve to win.
No, they just don't look particularly threatening, do they? When chances get through, they're few and far between. Yeah, when they look to play on the break, but they don't really go at it with much conviction or pace. Like there's a massive over reliance on Bustos.
Massive.
And
he's the only one that creates chances for Pacific.
So the rest, unfortunately, the rest of them, like Josh Hurd's not really been in any of the games this season. Like he's had a couple of chances, but he's not making much of an impact on games. You don't look back and think, "Oh, that was a decent performance." Like you just pick out a couple of things he's done. Unfortunately, at the moment, Montano, young kid, the midfield aren't getting forward to support. The fullbacks haven't got the pace that they had last year in Dada Luke and Christian Greco Taylor. Like it wasn't not like Caden Chong's not flying forward. Like you've got a lot of players who want to try and keep the ball, but then they try and make a few passes in a little sort of 10-yard square, but they've got nowhere else to go after that. They can't work their way up the pitch. So yeah, it's a tough one for them at the moment. It's it's going to need a big change, and Valour do the bits like you say. Maybe they could do part of that. I mean, they win the ball back quite well at times. They can get the ball forward up through the wings, or they can get the ball towards the edge of the box. But still, like I say, they're relying on worldies or mistakes from keepers too much. It's too much for me, and it's going to be for both of them. It's a real tough one to justify belief that they could battle for that 5th spot at the moment. The way they're playing currently.
Yeah, and I think for Pacific, I mean, the next 2 matches they have Atletico Ottawa at home at Starlight Stadium, and then they have York United at home at Starlight Stadium, and especially that Ottawa game, that's going to be a massive one for them because Ottawa are going to score, so you have to match them, but you also know they're going to concede. So really is going to test their defense. How do they contain somebody like David Rodriguez? But it's also going to be a test of their attack because you need to, take advantage of the gaps that Ottawa are going to have, especially in the first half, as they tended to do so far this season. And if, the Tridents aren't able to do that, then I can't see much happening for them in that match beyond, just probably picking the ball out of the net a few times.
Yeah.
York United might be a little bit easier, but they have Julian Altobelli, who is in incredible form. If he scores, then do you have it in you to reply? I don't really know if Pacific have that right now. And even for Valor, I mean, Valor have a bit of an easier game in the midweek on Wednesday at the time of recording. So in two days, when they faced Vancouver FC at home. So that one could be, if they can get a result there, it might turn the tide for them. But then they travel to Ottawa the following match day on Sunday, June 15th. And that one might be a very tough one. So I think the next couple of weeks will be telling for how these two teams' seasons are going to go, at least up until the halfway mark. I was talking about periods, the quarters last episode. I think if the next 2 matches don't go their way, then it's going to be looking really tough for them in this sort of quarter of the season. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with both of them as the matches continue. But that is all for this week. It's a little bit of a shorter episode than usual, but that's what happens when you have a couple of relatively boring games there. But hopefully you still found the episode entertaining. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast episode. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials to give your thoughts on the episodes and how you think the season is going so far. We are going thick and fast with the games, and obviously once Canadian Championship gets back, we'll talk more about Canadian Championship, maybe do a little bit of catch up there since we're unable to talk about much of the first round of the Canadian Championship quarterfinals. So we'll get back to that. Don't worry, we're not letting the Can Champ go other wayside at coast to coast. But until next time, I'm Felipe Ojeho.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC signing out.